Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of What If Civilization Started Over. In the last episode, we really didn't see a whole lot of events happen. The big events we saw were, as always, tensions have been escalating in South Africa, yet somehow still a war has not occurred. Alright, no, that's not on, definitely. Alright, well, pretend that never happened. That's what I want. Alright, so we saw South Africa tensions escalating. Over here, we saw this war continued out. Texas has pretty much collapsed at this point. Mexico is strong in the north, weak in the south. The Caribbean islands is probably the nation doing the best right now. They've probably gotten the most land. We also saw an uprising come out down in the southern part of Central America. So we might have a new Colombian nation. Over here in Australia, we saw a big thing pop out over here. This war kind of it it was wacky to say the least. Countries divided and then united, and they're really divided right now again. But for the most important event of the last episode, it was World War, or not World War. No, there's no World War right now. The Cold War has officially started. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get started. So, just like we used to do, we are starting off back here in North America as we see, or we'll start off here with America as they take over pretty much the rest of Texas. They make a swift movement in, and eventually they begin to fight against Mexican forces. If you remember the one thing, though, that is uh, the Caribbean islands and America are not fighting each other. And they're the only two of these six nations here that are not fighting each other. But here, as Texas has pretty much fallen already, we see West Mexico will come in to take the rest of the nation. But that doesn't sit too well with Mexico, who, for whatever reason, wanted this land. So they will move up through West Mexico to hopefully take over some more area. They make a naval landing on Baja California, but we see another naval landing made on Mexico as the West Mexicans make a very, very small landing near a major city in the south. Looking at the major cities, they they land right here near this one right here as they aim to take it over. This is the biggest major city in all of Mexico. Their capital is actually the second biggest, at least in terms of population. So if they can capture this one, they have a big hold. Moving south to Central America, with Mexico now fighting in four fronts, we see Central America will attempt at re-pushing into the north, and it goes quite well. We see them eventually be able to capture this major city as the Koreans help them to move back up and meet up with the Gulf of Mexico. They're, they almost finish off piercing through, but eventually we see the Caribbean islands with the help of the Swiss is able to push in and captures a very large portion of this land. They move in along the Caribbean island, or along Central America, and, and together the two of them encircle a large amount of Mexican troops here. But moving south, we see where a majority of Korea's forces are going, and that's to fight to recapture this island, and from there make a naval landing here, which is, which enables for Central America to push out the Caribbean. But we see another force is also able to do this as they push up right here. And despite having a pretty much a peace treaty going on already between the Colombians and the Caribbean islands, the Colombians still wanted to take over this land, and then they use it to continue pushing into Central America. They move up and almost capture this major city, as they had somehow gotten supplies from the Caribbean islands, which is in turn supplies from the Swiss. But we see this country begins a third invasion, now moving south into Ecuador. This and remember, this isn't really an actual country yet. They are more so just like they are a big rebellion. However, a few, er, quite a few countries have recognized them officially. Um, Most of those countries being in the Diamond Alliance. So that would include like not Central, that would include the Caribbean islands, Switzerland, Russia. Other countries have also recognized it too, such as Brazil. Well, Brazil's also in the alliance. But countries in the anti-colonial, the yeah, the anti-colonial organization. I don't remember if that's actually what I called it last episode, but they also recognize this thing, as it is kind of pro-Swiss, but it also doesn't like the Swiss. So we're not. It's it's kind of hard to tell with this thing, but eventually we see this war starts coming down to a standstill. Countries aren't really making it. There's no forward movements going on. Central America is the only spot where we actually see stuff happening, and we do see the blue team starts getting pushed back, as the one spot Korea wants the Central Americans to have control over is right in this bay. Obviously, they're not going to be able to get quite back this far, but this is a very well protected bay. But we see Central America will eventually be able to capture this major city. It is the last major city captured of this war, but there's still more lands captured. Out in West Mexico, we do see we see the Mexicans push just a little bit further more north, and eventually as they push up along this gulf or bay or whatever this is, we eventually see more Ethiopian forces arrive, and that will pretty much seal it. It is, yeah. I'd gotten confused for a second. Alright, well, but as a peace treaty is finally in sight, we move on to the Australian War, which at this point is going just as you would think. Korea had spent most of its forces in this area, and after one of three capitals is or after the second of three capitals, this blue country is captured. We see it just the Koreans will kind of stop focusing on this area as it's the more populated area and they have most of it under control. The only part they don't have under control is the central areas, New Zealand and part of Tasmania, but they will still shift their focus over into the west. And right as they capture this major city, we actually see the blue country will pretty much just split itself apart again. Um, but in doing that, they also surrender to this reddish orange country. And we'll take a look at what a peace treaty looks like for both of these wars. And also for anybody who is wondering, the um this peace both peace treaties are being held in Denmark at the same time because both of them involve or large outside countries who want to say in everything that goes on. So we'll take a look at what this peace treaty looks like. All right, so here we have our peace treaty. We'll start off in North America, as this one's a bit wonkier. So to start off, you see West Mexico gets a decent amount of land out of Texas. Do not get all of their land back down there, however. They only get a small portion back. Yeah. Out of every war, out of the North American war, West Texas was easily the biggest loser. As we see here, they lost the most land. We did not see America nor the Caribbean nation lose any land in this war. Just do that, simplify things over here. All in all, we see Mexico getting all of this there, as well as part of Baja California. Obviously, that will be returned. And I didn't do this. I didn't do the Caribbean nation. All right. Well, we see this. We see this part carved back into the. All right. So that's it. They got off pretty good. As for America, they they probably were the biggest winner of the war overall. Um, well, actually, Texas was the biggest loser of the war. Let's be honest. They don't exist anymore, so kind of hard for a country to be a winner when they don't exist. And yes, America did have to take that province. They really wanted all of this land, but no, they're not going to get that. This also returned to, or given to America. And up here, well, this little bit of land is obviously Mexican. All right, now we move on to the mess Central America is, or really it's more Mexico-ish. We see Central America getting all of this out of the war, so they got they got quite the amount. Over here, they also got a little bit back. As for the Caribbean islands, they get all of that, and this part they didn't even take over. So they're really becoming a good Caribbean empire almost. except they aren't an empire. They also get this down here out of Colombia. Speaking of Colombia, let's see what this new nation's like. Firstly, they take over that. They also take over most of the areas they got out of Ecuador, taking over all that except for this little tidbit right here. All right. And then also we see them taking over a very large portion from Colombia, with Colombia retaining on to very little land. They got a little bit there and a little bit there, and that was really it for Venezuela. All right, now we move on to this, and this one here, very simple. Bam, 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 bing, that, and that, and that, and that. Looks like there's a little bit of blue remaining right there. All right, so we have that, and then we have, all right. So as you can see, Red Australia has taken over well, half of the continent. Blue Australia is then separated. See the uh, now New Zealand team has returned. They're really forced to return. The red team doesn't want them to stay united because they fear the blue team would have a very easy attack to get to both sides. And going to capitals, we see the light blue teams, or the light yellow team's capital is going to be right here. We can remove that capital, coming all the way back here. We can remove two capitals here, actually. Firstly, Texas, obviously, because they don't exist. And we can also remove that capital there. And we replace it with firstly Colombia's capital. Like, it's actually going to be right there. Venezuela's is just moved over a little bit. I think that's actually more. I think that's Venezuelan land. But yeah. Alright. Now we move on from those two wars and on to something that we saw previous episode that I forgot to mention. Nukes. Right now there are 3 nukes in the entire world. One is owned by the Great Empire and 2 are in Michigan. But we're gonna update that because wouldn't we? Alright. So we're gonna start off by erasing both of those numbers, because both of them will be updated. Also, now there are 7 countries with nukes. So the the Great Lakes Empire has gone from 2. They are now at 6. Moving over to the Great Empire, they are now at 7. So I forgot if anyone makes any jokes in the comments. Ethiopia has now made 3 nukes. Moving on into Asia, back into Asia, we see Korea has 1 nuke, and so does China. Now we go on to Switzerland. Switzerland has 4 nukes. And for our last country, we head back over to the Americas as America has one nuke as well. So that is it for the nukes update. But now we move on to see another proxy war has just started up. There was one over here, and this over here turned into a proxy war. Technically, this was a proxy war, although it didn't really end it like one. Uh, Countries just kind of left, except for Korea, who funds the red team. But actually, we're gonna stop the proxy wars and go on to the alliances. So we see quite a few new additions to many alliances. Starting off with the Square Alliance, we see two additions. Firstly, we see Central America joins, and then we also see Red Australia joining. Going to the Triangle Alliance, which is Ethiopia's, we see West Mexico joins that. And, oh, Earth. And, there we go. Alright. So Ethiopia has joined the Triangle, or not Ethiopia. West Mexico has joined the Triangle Alliance. For the Cross Alliance, we see Mexico joining, and that is it. No other countries joined any alliances, but we're gonna move on to that proxy war. If this will look okay. Alright, so that proxy war, obviously it's gonna be down here. Why wouldn't it? So, it starts off the orange team and gold team. They've probably got the worst beef of all of them right now at this point. And it gets so bad that one of the leaders does something. Not gonna say what, right? Not gonna say what right now, but it's not good. That's all you'll know. But it causes them to then start an invasion after the retaliation. The retaliation was way worse. So yeah. But we see the gold team getting heavily invaded. But who who just might who who might join the gold team side? One country nearby has always had good relations with them, and obviously Ethiopia. Ethiopia will join, kind of help. Well, not officially join, but they're gonna help out against these guys or with these guys. But they don't really announce it too well. And Tanzania, even though, well, Tanzania wants some of this land. Initially, they had once gotten it, but somebody who's also still quite nearby, West France, had taken it over and invaded Tanzania themselves. So quite quickly, we see the gold team's capital is taken. However, Ethiopia will, as soon as finding this that Tanzania is in this war, they will send their forces straight into Tanzania. And well, Tanzania don't mess with the third strongest country in the world's best friend. So yeah, this isn't going too well, is it? We see Ethiopia pushes straight through Tanzania. Tanzania really does not stand any chance. and quite quickly we see their capital is captured. Tanzania will keep fighting though because I mean they're not gonna just fall again. Actually, they've probably fallen 3 times now to Ethiopia. But oh well, we see with the destruction in the north, we see the blue team here will set up for an invasion into the orange team, which goes quite well to start. But quite soon they are met up, up with by the green team, who pushes south from their border into this panhandle, and the two begin to skirmish in this major city. Eventually, we do see the blue team kind of captures half of it. Then the orange team starts getting aid itself, and then they start to push back through here, and they also get to part of the major city. And this major city, which you guys can make a name for, it becomes the deadliest battle in the entire world at this point. No other battle has had such casualties. Not in World War One, not in World War Two. There's thousands of forces here. It's one of the largest major cities in the Orange Team. In fact, it's the third largest, with the capital on this one on the coast here being first and second respectively. But yeah, the Orange Team had the Orange Team also has help, quite obviously. Why wouldn't they? So we then see them push into the Green Team. And lastly, our fifth and final country well, that kind of final country to actually start invading another country will join this war. And that is going to be the purple team here. The pink team, they're not really doing anything. They don't have good relations with any of these countries, sure, but they're not going to start invading any because overall they're the weakest and they already know what's coming. They have a very smart leader. So, but we see another major city is captured in the green team. All right. We see the gold team will begin its own invasion into the green team over here as well. They push in, and they're able to take a decent amount of bit of land. They then start pushing up against the pink team. You kind of cut it up a little bit, and push in further through here. And they begin to make a giant circle through this country, sending forces up through here as well. And it's quite it becomes apparent what they're doing, but it becomes apparent too late as the gold team encircles a very large amount of troops and starts sending Ethiopian forces through. Speaking of Ethiopia, they will then they will now begin their invasion into into the pink team as well. It's one thing that they wanted after World War II, they did not. Well, one of the things they wanted after World War II that they did not get was was access to this lake here. So they're going to try and take that. Moving south, we see the gold team and Ethiopian aid is able to recapture a major city. They also are able to recapture quite a bit of coastline. In fact, they recapture all of it. And now they start to push south and capture the orange team's capital city very quickly. This will cause the orange team to get to a disadvantage, and we see this green team over here begins to push back against them. Eventually, another invasion is made into the orange team by this green team, and they instantly spearhead towards this major city. We now see that another outside country is starting to get involved in this war, and that is the Great Empire. They see that this green team is able to kind of do this. They're also the strongest of these nations at this point because the Great Empire's been secretly funding them for a while. But the Great Empire will officially begin to storm its aid down here. And seeing as that happened, we see Korea, the Great Lakes Empire, and Switzerland all begin to stake their claim over countries. Switzerland will start aiding into South Africa, whereas we see the Great Lakes Empire goes for Tanzania. And lastly, Korea will send their aid into the Orange Team, as well as also sending some aid to Madagascar. But you see the aid to the Green Team will arrive first, and we see it being extremely useful. Although Ethiopia is the closest, I've already kind of mentioned them, and they're also directly involved in this war, so obviously, oh my god, stupid dogs. Sure. So we see the Green Team is just it's able to make a giant spearhead this long and still is able to just hold it because of the Great Empire's aid so far. Eventually, from this, they begin to send out branches, but the old, or not the old empire, that's not this WICSO, but we now take a look and see that another country's aid has finally started to arrive, coming out from Korea, China, and Sumatra, which are the fifth, sixth, and seventh powers, or no, fourth, sixth, and seventh, I believe. Yes, fourth, sixth, and seventh. Right. But or once the square team's aid starts arriving into this country, we see the spearhead pretty much just falls apart on the spot. It starts getting pushed back, and then it's pushed in through here. This area here is encircled, and then another part is encircled. Then we see the Koreans attempt to push into this major city. They capture it, however, they're unable to pinch this too close, which allows these for this aid to escape back. We see the orange team begins to close in here. They capture this major city and push in on this route. They push in on the route. But now we see that Switzerland's aid has started arriving, and with this, they're able to strongly push through the orange team, as the Koreans didn't really send much aid down south, so it's majorly undefended. Seeing as this is the case, you see the Great Empire will then firstly take over this major city, and then they start their push back through. They push the Orange team out of their territory and move up through the south. The Orange team loses that, as well as up here, as the Gold team figures out that the North is also major, it's wildly undefended. They also kick the orange team out from their territory for most of it up in the north. So we see all of this gets back to these guys against the purple team. While they're not doing too well at all, this area, this encirclement here fell, and we see um, the gold team kind of shift its focus to its number one enemy, which is obviously Tanzania. These guys have had a decent history again of dueling each other. Well, not actually dueling, but and their capital's already captured, so they'll get about halfway, and Ethiopia will meet up with them. And well, this is just a lost cause. Whoever's supporting this must be dumb because I mean their capital's already captured. What's the point? But we see the Great Lakes Empire having their aid arrive last. But once it does, it is not just theirs. It's also from America, who is at this point the number five power. So you've got the number one and the number five power aiding this, and well, that's a lot of damage. If you know, if you know, you know. But with the proximity of Ethiopia, we do see all of their aid is always arriving first, and the green team is actually the one suffering the most, as their aid is their main the best way to get aid would be going through Ethiopia, but clearly that's not gonna work. You could go through the Red Sea. Ethiopia is gonna pinch you off there. If not, the Cyan team might capture you. You can't really go through the Strait of Gibraltar either. So we see Great Empire begins to develop some stealth planes to send their supplies down here. And eventually they realize these stealth planes are actually really good. We can use them elsewhere. So, unbeknownst to the entire world, the Great Empire sends spy planes into Switzerland, into the Great Lakes Empire, into Ethiopia, into Korea, into many countries across the world. But eventually, one is shot down over Myanmar, but nobody recognizes these, so nobody knows where it came from, and it's a little off, to say the least. Like people are pointing fingers at everyone. Korea, like some the Great Empire blames Korea, Korea blames Ethiopia, and it goes back and forth between the five. Other countries make their own accusations, but it's mainly these five that are pointing all the fingers. Mm. But we will, well, we see that eventually someone, eventually it was shot over Myanmar, so that no one suspects Ethiopia as much as anyone else. Myanmar's biggest hater at this point would probably be Korea, so that's why the Great Empire had blamed Korea. But global tensions are at this point rising to the point where it's kind of hard not to suspect a World War III. We see the Great Empire is starting to station troops along the border with Persia, along the border with Kuwait, along this Yemen border, especially along the border of Ethiopia. They put troops in their northern border. They put troops up here. They tell Tibet and Pakistan to arm their borders. They tell every cross alliance member to arm their border unless they don't border anyone that's in the diamond, trapezoid, square, or triangle alliances. It's like these two here, they're not really arming their border much. Same with these two here. But the spot where we see them most border arming, or I don't know, we see we see it mostly happening over here, as tensions are still highest in this region, and we see the country sending the most arms to their border is America, but we'll move on from that and back down into this war for the final event of the war. The gold team will make a third pierce through the orange team's defense, and they start sending troops into this spot. Eventually, it's, it starts to become unveiled what their plan is, and they even start working with South Africa. Now we move on to our final few events of the episode. As we come over here, we see this island country has just gained another member. The Island Survivor Religion. This pink team has joined it, and more areas are starting to kind of show interest in joining it. It's not like we're seeing like it's not Unitarian level stuff. But these countries are like they're rapidly developing. They're kind of getting this sense like they're starting at this point. The Island Survivor country, it's starting to get on par with like top 40, top 30 level country technology. Like it's got some technology that's equal to a great empire. More countries want in on this, and we do see one more country joining, and that final country will also have a decent effect on how Korea views these guys. That final country is the Philippines, but that it's not the final full country, as other small islands want will attempt at seceding away. You see these three islands up here will join it. A couple islands from the green team join. Over here, we see these two islands joining. We also see this group also secede away from Sumatra. And obviously, Sumatra's not liking this. The green team's not liking it. Even the blue team. The blue team's really just been a chill guy. Last thing I remember them doing was invading this country over here. But it also, like I've said in previous episodes, is not just over in that area. Eventually, it starts spreading out here, and there's a lot of thoughts about Puerto Rico joining the island survivors. We see that the Dark Sign team, aka Portugal, has been wanting to give up these islands for a while, so they were initially just going to let them go, but the island survivor religion has taken them over instead. But that will do it for today's episode of What If Civilization Started Over. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.